Hey folks, David Stewart here. Time for your daily trending. June 20th, 2020. Let's hop into Twitter. We'll look at some YouTube stuff and I'll give you the gist. UFC 250. Bunch of stuff with UFC about who won and who didn't win. I guess there was a fight, featherweight fight between a couple of women, and Amanda Nunes won. So if you're into that, man, she looks really bloody. That's pretty brutal. I don't know how people feel about women in UFC fights. I don't know if that's a really popular thing to watch, women in this kind of blood sport. It seems a little odd to me. It seems somewhat, I'm not going to say it seems perverse, but it definitely seems very strange to me. A little bit of a aesthetic challenge, a little bit of a challenge of sensibility to see women being violent in this way. But, if that's what they want to do, that's their choice. And if people enjoy watching it, then I guess there's a market for it, so you can keep having it done. I don't think either of these women are part of the old controversy where you actually had biological males fighting biological females in the female category because they happen to be trans. Now, here's the big one that I think is pretty entertaining, which is J.K. Rowling. Everybody hating on Miss Rowling because she refuses to bend the knee to some part of the global trans agenda. If sex isn't real, there's no same-sex attraction. If sex isn't real, the lived reality of women globally is erased. I know and love trans people, but erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It isn't hate to speak the truth. And this is the truth. There's really no such thing as trans if you don't have this concept of defined genders. So as soon as you start saying, well, there's some sort of gender is a social construct, then you're really saying that there's no such thing as trans, or trans people are somehow a social construct themselves, that their mentality is socially constructed and therefore could be deconstructed through psychology or something like that. So she gets labeled as what's called a TERF, which is a trans exclusionary radical feminist, if you're not familiar with that term. And this was all started with a reaction to some article calling women people who menstruate. Now, if you want to have something that's completely bizarre, it's describing woman or a female as people who menstruate. Think about all those words describing one bodily function in order to kind of circumscribe what you just want to say, which is the category of female. All of those words to just describe something that we've had a word for, woman, since the dawn of time, and there's a word for it in pretty much every language. I'm not aware of any language that doesn't delineate between male and female, the most basic set of categories that we have as human beings. But of course, she's, people were going to try to cancel her, but you can't really cancel her after everybody's bought $100 million worth of books, or $1 billion. I think she might be a billionaire now from selling books. As crazy as that sounds. So you can't really cancel her after she sold like all the books in the known universe, and like everyone owns one of her books. Even if everybody stopped buying Harry Potter stuff tomorrow, it wouldn't really matter. And I've thrown I've lobbed plenty of boulders at this woman before for after the fact, telling people to say Dumbledore is gay, to get a couple of little brownie points from the lefty crowd, from the rainbow crowd. Like, oh yes, Dumbledore was gay the whole time. It's like, no, Dumbledore his sexuality wasn't part of the story. His sexuality is irrelevant. So calling him gay after the fact is not exactly brave. If you really wanted to be brave, you'd put gay in the book, but then you would have produced something completely inappropriate for children, and we're talking about children's literature here. And so I approve of her not putting Dumbledore's gay sexuality into a set of children's books. Conor McGregor says he's retiring again. I've seen these MMA guys retire and come back. I know for certain, I would say that if Conor McGregor were offered a large enough purse, he'd be back in the ring. He'd be back in the octagon for sure. It's all about money at the end of the day. I remember there's been several big name MMA guys that retired and came back. Maybe because they missed the fights, maybe because they wanted the money. There was more money in it, But I don't know. I would take that with a grain of salt. He said it several times. That just means he's been wanting to retire for a while. He's been wanting to check out of the MMA business. But I guarantee you, if there's still a lot of money in it, he would probably stick with it. At least, come back for another couple fights. All right. Avatar 2. No, not Avatar The Last Airbender, but Avatar, James Cameron's Avatar, which was a movie that some people watched. It was apparently the best-selling movie of all time. Now, no question, he's been waiting for over a decade for it. I'm getting closer and closer. The first was made in 2009, and it was beautiful. Now imagine how much more beautiful it will be. All right. The thing is that I don't think the fidelity of computer graphics have increased all that much since 2009. They maybe have increased a little bit. It might be quicker, easier, and cheaper to achieve the same fidelity they had in the original game, or in the original movie, I mean. But one of the things that you have to know is that increasing fidelity does not increase the aesthetic quality of something. In other words, just because you make the graphics more precise does not mean that you make them more beautiful. A painting with visible brushstrokes can be more beautiful than a perfectly rendered 3D image, depending on the aesthetic approach of the artist. Now, I don't think Avatar was bad in terms of aesthetics at all. I think aesthetically it was fairly pleasing. It was very bright, very colorful. I didn't like the story of Avatar is really what it comes down to for me. And the aesthetics were quite good. I don't think you're going to see more aesthetic achievement. You probably have hopefully new aesthetics or something like that. I do think that James Cameron, if he was going to make another movie like this, is going to try to up the quality and up the visual elements, but I don't think that there's that much further to go as far as aesthetics. You can deliver different aesthetics, but not necessarily better aesthetics. So if people are expecting to get blown away like they were with that first one, the fidelity probably hasn't increased enough for you to get totally blown away. But more than that, the aesthetics are really not going to increase enough for you to get blown away. That's the main thing that I have there. So I'm not that excited about it because I didn't think the first one had a very good story. But, you may not. Now, this is a funny one. Sean O'Malley destroys Eddie Wineland with first round KO at UFC 250. Destroys him. And whenever I see the word destroy, it's like, it makes me think of some kind of supervillain blowing him up with like a bomb. It's just like, exploding. And it's like, well, no, he got knocked out. He didn't get destroyed and turned into atoms, That's not what happened. And maybe we'll get to see the knockout here. Oh, that was the knockout. He just kind of leaned into the punch, and that was it. I mean, that was not what I would call destroyed. This is like, I mean, it looks like he barely hit him. He just kind of leaned into the punch and it hit him just the right way. That's not a destruction. That's not destroys. He got knocked out, but he didn't get destroyed. I don't think so with that. Let's see what else is trending here. Jurassic World, whatever. Now there's one, maybe it's at the bottom here and I can find it. If not, I'll just talk about it, which is, what does publishing pay you? So there was this one that was trending earlier, and maybe I can actually bring it up here on, I'll pull up another window here because I think I have it from some chat. I was chatting with some folks about it. Basically, the idea here was that publishing paid me is the hashtag. The thesis was that people of color, PoCs, imagine how calling people who aren't white, we're going to call them PoCs. Did anyone think this through? POC. They're PoCs over there. It's like, they're smallpox. They're PoCs, right? So people who aren't white get paid bigger advances than people, or get paid smaller advances than people who are white. Now, so this is a bunch of people talking about what advances they got. Now, if you're to go look this up, I'm going to tell you there's a bunch of people that I think are lying about how much money they got. There's also a bunch of people that I think don't actually know what advance means. Maybe, and they appear to be authors. Here's what an advance is. An advance is being paid in advance of royalties received. So when you sell a book, a portion of the sales you receive is royalties. When you're paid in advance, that means they're paying you what they expect to collect in royalties in advance, some portion of it. So if they pay you $5,000 in advance, that means that your first $5,000 in royalties you're getting before any books have sold. That's what a $5,000 advance is. Now, you can keep earning royalties past that $5,000. So if you sell a bunch of books and the publishing company recovers the $5,000 worth of royalties they would normally have paid you, after that they pay you additional royalties. Now this is important because you're not paid advances just because it's not like a free gift of money. Otherwise, publishing companies, well, they are going out of business, but they would have a hard time running their business in such a way that they're just giving away money to people willy-nilly, right? So basically what happens with an advance is that if you, let's say you have two authors and one is a white woman and one is not a white woman, a black woman, and they pay the black woman half in terms of advance than the white woman, but they sell the same number of books over time. They'll actually get paid the exact same amount of money as long as their contract says that their royalty share is the same, and it's usually pretty standard. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. So they actually get paid the same amount of money. It's just the white person would be paid more up front. So that's that right there. If there's a difference in total amount of money being earned between the two groups, it's because there's a lot more books being sold by that group than the other group. And I think it's not wise to assume that all people who are not white women are going to be writing the same books for the same audience as the people who are white women. Basically, if you are, if you're of a particular ethnicity and you're writing books directed towards that ethnicity, it might be a smaller portion of the market, and therefore it's going to sell fewer books. It doesn't mean that no white women are going to read it. It just means that, a smaller portion of overall people are going to end up reading it. It's more of a niche product rather than something that is really wide. Now, I've talked about this before in other videos. The publishing industry is completely dominated by white women. White women run the industry. They're like 70% or something of all published authors. Now, if you look at the total breakdown, minorities are really overrepresented in the publishing space, with the exception of men. Men are extremely underrepresented. They're underrepresented as authors, and they're underrepresented as publishers and people working on the publishing side of it. So the publishing side of it is run by white women, and most authors are white women. And in fact, in my entire life, I've only met one person who wasn't a white woman in real life. That is, outside of like meeting other authors, meeting other sci-fi authors, for instance. I meet a lot of men, but just growing up in college, only white women wanted to be authors. There was no one I met who wanted to be an author who wasn't a white woman, except for like one dude. I met one dude who wasn't a white woman who wanted to be an author. So it kind of makes sense that the industry is just stuffed to the gills with white women. Maybe the white women are really discriminating against all of these people who aren't white women, including white men. But there's that other side of it, which is that basically, if they were selling the same amount of books, they'd be making the same amount of money. So there's a difference in what they're writing and to what audience they happen to be writing that book. White women might be writing a lot of stuff that other white women read. The reality is white women are like the mega readers. And I know that I'm saying the word white women a lot, but that's just the demographic that's really interested in books. I have no judgment, positive or negative, against it. There's a lot of women like to read more books than men do, and especially when it comes to fiction, they read a lot more fiction than men. Men like nonfiction more than women, and women like fiction a lot more than men. So the disparity that exists between advances might have to do with a lot of things that aren't necessarily racist. It might be racism. I think it probably has more to do with other factors encapsulating the entire industry. It's an industry that's really directed in a great part towards the heaviest reading demographic, which is women, and white women in particular. And they read a lot of romance and a lot of other things like that. So I know that maybe if you're a subscriber to my channel, we might be in our own little bubble where we love science fiction and we love fantasy stuff. And then you get surprised that romance will like outsell science fiction like 50 to 1 or something like that. Well, it's because of the demographic. The super readers are all women. The women who, people who get the most out of their Kindle Unlimited account tend to be women. They're the ones who read like 8-10 books a week. I don't read 8 or 10 books a week. You know, I read pretty often, but I'm not reading 8 or 10 books a week. I maybe read like 1 book a week, you know? So there's people that are putting me to absolute shame with the amount of reading they do. So that's probably part of the exception. But if you think that it's those racist Karens, you let me know down in the comment section, and I'd be happy to read your response to it. Anyway, thanks so much for watching this little daily trending, and hopefully it's been informative with some of what's going on. Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America, they recently said that they're going to waive all of their fees for Black authors, which actually might be a violation of civil rights law. I'll just put that out there. You know, you can't discriminate based on race if you're like a common carrier or you're part of a nonprofit public service, which is what they are. So kind of interesting that they would choose to, I mean, I know why they choose to do it at this time. It's for brownie bucks, but they may not have thought that one all the way through. You know, you could encourage blacks and other minorities to apply to your organization, but you can't just say that we're going to unilaterally waive all other, you know, all fees. For example, it'd be like charging a different amount for different races. It doesn't really jive, doesn't really fly. So anyway, guys, I'll see y'all next time.